in that was a pretty standard clause, a shotgun clause. And the shotgun clause honestly seemed really, really big and scary at the time. Right. And I can describe it. If
Please do.
Like. Yeah. So ultimately in most agreements, I think, or in a large part, there's a shotgun agreement, which sounds really scary. It basically says, if we disagree, I can offer to buy you out at a said price. And interestingly, the price doesn't even have to be driven by the mechanism that is in other parts of the clause of the agreement. It's just a price. But the way that most work is that there's a time frame against that offer, and there's a reciprocality against that offer. So I could offer my partners $1 million for their shares, and then I would have to wait, and they would have totally their choice. They could either decide to sell me at $1 million, or they have to buy me at $1 million. And so at the time, it seemed like a crazy, scary thing, right? Where you're going to put an offer out and try and figure out what price to go in at, because you can't lowball the price. If you lowball the price, then you're going to end up selling at a lower price. And so, you know, as we were going through all this conflict, it really forced me at that time, I called myself a bit of a wannabe entrepreneur, right? Because I hadn't put my own cash up. I was running the businesses, but it really forced me to understand what my priorities were, which was, okay, was I willing to now come up with this money? And was I passionate enough that I believed that with that and the new face forward of the business, that we could actually go drive the business forward? And at the same time, you know, probably like most founders in a certain piece of their business, I believe that the business defined me at the time, right? You know, I wanted to be a founder. I didn't want to be an entrepreneur. Sorry, I didn't want to be an employee. I wanted to be an entrepreneur. This is my shot. And so this one clause actually drives a lot of clarity in what you want in these really tensive situations, I would say. And so I went back and forth a bunch of times. My intention was actually to try and buy the business. And so I was working on an offer to go try and buy the business.
You and this partner of yours
Yeah.
So
and then right in the middle of it, I ended up getting a shotgun from one of the partners where they set the price. And then I had 10 days. And so this is where the naivety of everything that I've explained to you leading up to this point really comes to a crescendo, because I was like, well, this is like, whoa, what do you mean you're shotgunning me? Because I'm the guy driving the business. And they basically said, hey, look, we don't want to deal with it anymore. And so the business needs resolution, and we're prepared to have you walk in order to get resolution. And we'd rather be the drivers of it than the acceptors of it. And as irrational as that sounded at the time, it makes total logical sense now in hindsight. I've been through cycles in businesses where as the majority partner, you kind of have to take control of that situation. And as the minority partner, you've kind of got to realize that if you want control of it, you really have to be proactive on it. And I would say proactive on all fronts of it: the pricing, the terms, the relationships, the communication. Because interestingly, and I don't know unilaterally, but I would say for the most part, I believe this is true based on most of the understandings I've had around them, is that shotgun agreements are one-to-one, not one-to-many or company-to-one. And so this is where the nuance of it got really interesting for us, which is even if I'd said yes to buying the first partner, the second partner could have just increased the price on me. And then I would have had to go say yes to that piece, or I would have been stuck in this situation where I'd owned part of it, but couldn't get all of it.
I see. So one partner said, look, I'm going to buy your shares. And you had to decide that one partner. And then once you consummated that deal, you could have been shotgunned again by the second partner.
Or I would have had to shotgun.
Okay.
Because, you know, at that point, let's assume I could have acquired 35% of the company, but I still had 65% out there in individuals. And so once again, entrepreneurial naivety around these agreements and shotguns and minority partners versus majority partners, I hadn't really understood that part of the equation, which was not only did I have to go negotiate those in pieces, the price could have changed every single time just based on that clause. And so I ended up declining it. And
declining it, meaning they offered to buy you out.
And I said, okay, I would sell, but I wouldn't buy back. And so when I mean decline, and the reason I use decline, and maybe not the right term, but I ended up leaving the company.
Okay.
I ended up going to them and saying, you know what, I didn't want to get into this multiple situation. I actually at one point tried to find if there was a way to navigate around the shotgun, but once it was in process, it was in process. And so I ended up selling the business and
selling your shares in it to them.
Yeah. And it was for around like $216,000. Call it. It was about that.
That represented what multiple of EBITDA? I'm trying to think of, were they fair to you in the 3 to 4 times EBITDA?
Yeah, they were pretty fair to me. Yeah. If you would assume the business did maybe 200,000, then I own 20%. So the math is pretty fair from that standpoint, right? The math was pretty fair. And the reason being is that they had to be prepared on the other side that I would buy them at that, and they didn't want to undervalue their shares. Mm-hmm. And so as a mechanism, it seems like a really brutal mechanism in a shareholders agreement. But when you get to the part where you've sort of either blown past or haven't respected enough other ways to manage dispute, I actually thought it was, in hindsight, probably the most rational way to not tank a whole company based on a dispute or irreconcilable differences from that standpoint.